Hello and welcome to this Euronews debate on the potential for 5G networks here in Europe. We're asking how this new mobile technology is going to change the way we live, work and have fun. It's not just about faster download speeds, it's also about rethinking the way we organise and manage important services like transport and industries like manufacturing. And to help us understand what 5G means for you and me, I'm joined by our guests. Laurent Leboucher, the Chief Technical Officer of French telecoms giant Orange, Dr. Philippe Song, the Chief Marketing Officer at Huawei Carrier Business Group, one of the main business groups inside the Chinese ICT provider, and Alex Sinclair, the Chief Technical Officer at GSMA, the organisation representing mobile communications companies worldwide. First off, I'm going to go to you, Alex. Can you paint a bit of a picture of where we are in Europe at the moment in terms of 5G? How is the rollout going? A lot of people say that Europe's behind, but what's the real picture?
Well, I guess the first thing to point out is that 5G is the fastest generation ever deployed. There are about 214 networks live already. If you look at the world leaders right now, it's countries like China, South Korea, the US. Europe's a little bit behind, but there's a lot of momentum here as well. We've just published our European Mobile Economy Report. I think there's 108 networks live in 34 markets. So a little bit behind, but there's still a lot of momentum here in Europe as well.
What would be the kind of reason for any slowness in Europe? Is it the fact that it's just a complex place with 27 countries and all of these different providers?
That's certainly part of the equation. I mean, it's a complex question, but if you look at the scale in places like China and the US, you've got China with 1.5 billion people and 4 operators. You've got the US with 400 million and 3 major carriers. There are 108 live already in Europe, and there's 182 of our members that are operators in Europe. So you can imagine, with policies being defined on a national basis, it's a little bit more like a jigsaw.
Yeah, a bit of a jigsaw, but one which is coming together as far as I've understood. Philip, let's go to you. What's your view on the global development of 5G at the moment? Where are the best use cases to be found in the world?
It's a very interesting question. So 5G actually already launched 3 years ago. So far, I think we can say it has been proved a very successful technology. It has seen a lot of the growth, including the 5G network deployment, consumer services, and the industry applications are all moving forward. So by the end of October, so more than 30 operators has launched commercially the 5G services, and with more than 3 million 5G base stations deployed around the world. So over the past 3 years, the world's top 20 operators by the number of the 5G stations already saw their average revenues per user increased by more than 10%. So we believe the 5G networks should be deployed to improve both of the coverage and the services. So good user experience and will be the key in increasing the 5G subscribers. So in terms of the consumer services, the operators in South Korea, Thailand, and China are the leaders in the commercializing the 5G AR. They have proven the 5G AR brings value through the applications like the AR entertainment, the AR education, and the AR tourism. So the 5G delivers the higher the bandwidth and the speed, so are comparable to the fiber home broadband. So that's why the 5G, the fixed wireless access services, or we can name the FWA, are growing rapidly in Middle East and Europe as well. So in terms of the industry applications, the 5G applications are also becoming a new engine of the revenue growth for operators. So these applications bring the services innovation and can create the new business value for the operators. And in my memory, Chinese operators already have more than 5,000 commercial 5G 2B projects. So this made the 5G 2B the fastest growing services in terms of the revenues for operators. So the operators already learned a lot from the running the 5G over the past 3 years. So I'm sure this will accelerate the 5G business success around the whole world. So it's
let me thank you for that. Laurent, where are the use cases that are impressing you at the moment in the world? Because I'm sure you travel around and see these installations. From the point of view from Orange, where are the use cases that you think that are most impressive?
Thank you. So I would say maybe at first, I think that we have already deployed 5G in several markets in Europe. And what we can see is that it already provides the best experience in terms of speed, in terms of latency, of course, to everybody who owns a 5G device. So it improves it already improves the experience for all mobile users. And I would say that the first benefit of 5G that we experience today is the fact that it helps us as an operator to increase the capacity of our mobile network. It was mandatory to do it because otherwise the speed of everyone would have decreased. So if we want to cope with the increase in usage that we experience with networks, we definitely have had to deploy 5G. What I would say, just to highlight that, if I take an example, in France today, outside of the rural places where we have just started to deploy, I mean in typical urban areas, the Orange 5G customer experience is already double what a 4G customer user can experience in terms of bandwidth. So it means that in all cases, it's more than 200 megabits per users, megabits per second in cities. So I think it's already a good advantage. But I think that 5G, to answer your question, can provide much more. There is definitely a second phase of 5G that we are preparing today, and that will be available progressively, step by step, around the world. And as you said, and as Philippe said, also it has already started in some areas in the world, especially in Asia. In this second phase, it will depend also on all the new devices that will emerge. So we can think of XR, we can think of VR, and all new devices that will come, also including also connected cars, which will embed 5G. Devices also specialized for instance, to do like video cameras. All these devices will have some specific needs in terms of speed, but also in terms of latency, in terms of reliability.
Have you actually been there, Laurent, and experienced, in talking about cases in China or South Korea or Thailand? Have you been there and actually experienced that 5G world? And can you tell us kind of from a European point of view, what's it like?
Well, to be honest with you, I would love to come back to China. Unfortunately, because of the crisis, the COVID crisis, I did not have this opportunity. But as soon as it will be possible, I will get there definitely.
Alex, can you bring us then a little bit on that to just kind of tell us what that experience is like, the one that's been described already? What's it like to live a 5G world?
Well, it's very varied. As both Philippe and Laurent pointed out, there are so many different applications. But you mentioned Thailand, for example. I was in Thailand last week at, ironically, Huawei's mobile broadband conference. And there the government was very proudly, rightly proud, of their 5G ambulances and 5G hospitals. We've also demonstrated some of the other things that Philippe was talking about in AR, with like digital avatars and tourist guides and things like that. In Bonn, for example, and Shibuya in Tokyo. I mean, the possibilities are endless. There are just so many different experiences that you can have. There's a lot of operators moving into what is largely being called the metaverse these days. You've got Deutsche Telekom and SK in Korea, bringing in their, I think it's called IFLAN, the platform. You've got Telefonica with their open to metaverse. I mean, these are all the things, as Laurent said, that will be possible in the near future as well. If you combine not just 5G technology, but cloud edge computing as well, then some of the experiences you'll be able to get in an XR environment will be quite amazing as well.
Laurent, what are the technical hurdles at the moment that are kind of slowing down any rollout in Europe? Or are they technical? Or are they maybe are they supply chain issues? Are they all to do with licensing? What's kind of the break, I suppose, on their full deployment of 5G at the moment in Europe?
Well, I think the challenges that we face are typical challenges that all operators in the world can understand. And these are challenges that we overcome step by step. So the first one, of course, is access to spectrum. We need spectrum. It has always been a challenge. And in Europe, it is allocated to operators in each country. So it means that there is a specific process and there is a specific timeline for each country. We definitely want to deploy 5G in new spectrum bands, so typically 3.5, and this is the way we deploy it in Europe today. But not all governments have granted yet the license to do it, but it will come. For instance, in Poland, we don't have yet the full 5G spectrum, but I'm sure that it will be sold very quickly.
So those are kind of procedural governmental obstacles then. It's administrative stuff. It's somebody in an office stamping some paper. That's what's, if there's any break, it's that.
A little bit more complex than that, but yes, you're right. Then there is another challenge that we also face is also to get access to the full range of 5G devices. We strongly depend on the device ecosystem. So at least for smartphone, I think now it's already good. We already have a good set of devices. And by the way, today in our shops, more than 60% of all the devices that we sell in our shops are 5G compatible. So I think at least for smartphones, it's already solved. For other devices which are a little bit more exotic, it will take more time.
We often talk about 5G being a kind of enabler of another world, and we've talked about already some of the fun examples, I suppose, and I think we'll probably come back to some of those as well because they're really interesting. But I want to talk about how 5G changes cities, how it changes industries. Can I go over to you, Philip? Can you give us an idea of what a 5G city is like?
So, like I said just now, so the 5G has already created the great value for the industry. So just in the past 3 years, the industries can embracing the 5G and using it as a tool for the digital transformation. So we believe the 5G to be can make the business smarter, greener, and more secure and more efficient. So in South Africa, the 5G now has been deployed in mines to enable to remote operation. So this improves the working conditions of the mining workers and make them to feel the safer and happier in work. And another examples happened in Kuwait. The operators are providing the new services for the oil and the gas industry by leveraging the 5G's higher the larger capacity and the higher the reliability. So they have deployed the 5G at more than the 500 oil wells and providing the oil companies with the services like the safe production and the well call speeding alarms. And I also would like to share a case happened in Europe as well. In Hungary, the 5G's the high bandwidth, the low latency, and already enabled the operators to provide the services like the remote control of the crane for the post. So the services can help workers to working there's the working conditions and the port efficiency. So the 5G has also supported the digitalization of the multiple industries by providing the high quality connectivities. we are still working with our industry partners to exploit how the 5G and other technologies like the cloud computing can be further combined together to help operators to enable the industries. So we have to think there's still a range of the technical challenges that need to be addressed. So we are focusing on helping operators to speed up the 5G deployment and improve the user experience and reduce energy consumptions.
Laurent,
So,
how is this 5G changing mindsets, though? We've got some use cases there, but how is it changing the way people are thinking in industries, things like manufacturing?
So I can share very good examples, just like a remote control. So originally, the workers have to work in the field, but the room is very narrow, and the workers have to work there for more than 4 hours, because it's very difficult to climb up and climb down. But at the moment, they can remote to control these car or vehicles remotely, just in the air-conditioned room, the office. So everything is changed, and more efficiency, and also more safer.
Laurent, can I get some examples from you on this kind of industrial and manufacturing world?
Yes, of course, and I think, as Philippe said, that there is a quite very wide range of new opportunities for different sectors, especially in the industry, as you said. So typically, if you want, for instance, to help technicians to operate machines, to give them access also to augmented reality application to help in terms of maintenance of systems, they will use 5G connected tablets or smartphones or even headsets. They can superpose to, on their headsets some information, some virtual data, so to help them to understand how it works, to understand also how they can maintain a solution. But it can also be used also to automate robotic systems to help to monitor production lines in real time, to, for instance, to understand the quality of the artifacts which are built on a production line, and to react in real time to, for instance, to guide where the production line should behave, and maybe in some cases to change the behavior in real time, to adjust to different circumstances. I think robots and also autonomous vehicles in the plant, on the plant, also are something which is very important, and this is already something I visited. I visited already, for instance, in Finland, Nokia has a plant where you can see all the AGV vehicles which are used and which can really benefit from this connectivity. So I think there are really very interesting use cases. I would perhaps also stress the fact that we can also leverage locally data and data storage and data processing. For instance, if we want to implement video vision computing solution, computer vision solutions, where you need also to introduce some machine learning to recognize some artifacts and so on. You need to do that locally, and with 5G, it will be possible to slice the network and to implement local networks to address those use cases.
Alex, a lot of the projects that I've heard about in Europe, that I've read about, are kind of local networks. So in Paris, we've got La Défense building a 5G local network. In Frankfurt Airport, they're going to have a private 5G network. What is that model? Can you talk us through and explain it? Because I don't really understand why that's the way things are being deployed.
So there's an awful lot of these use cases. And by the way, we have a 5G transformation hub where we document a lot of these. And we call them private networks. Now, some of them are dedicated private networks. Some of them are virtual. As Laurent mentioned, you can slice the network to have the same effect. You were talking about manufacturing. Stuttgart has a Bosch manufacturing line that's all 5G, dedicated network. Main motivation behind that is they hate wires. Wires are the enemy of production lines. They get in the way. So it's completely wireless, and you can retool the line to produce different things very quickly. And every second of downtime on a production line costs a lot of money for the company. So that's an example. You mentioned ports. Seaports and airports all over the world are adopting 5G. A lot of them are having private networks. Here in the UK, for example, Verizon runs the Port of Southampton private network as well. I was at our show in Mobile World Congress Americas last month, and we had the CTO of Las Vegas City. They have a dedicated 5G network. They're using some of the use cases that Philip and Laurent talked about for autonomous vehicles, traffic management, as in smart traffic. Also for security, they're using 5G millimeter wave for monitoring of open and public spaces and stuff like that as well. But you asked about the model. It varies from country to country, but obviously it depends very tightly on the actual requirements, because the motivation for having your own network is usually about control, or at least that's the perception if you ask the people doing it. It's often around data, as Laurent mentioned. In a manufacturing line, product line, for example, they don't want the information leaving the factory. So some of it is around wanting control. Some of it is around wanting not just low latency, but predictable and bounded latency. Now, for a lot of those applications, you can do that with a sliced public network. But nonetheless, some people still feel that they need a dedicated private network, be it a campus, a production line, an airport. Most of those are also being done, by the way, in partnership with operators. But in some countries, it is possible to do that directly. Germany is an obvious example, and I did mention Bosch earlier.
Listening to you and thinking through logically what you're saying, particularly about network slicing, ultimately you think that, in fact, the model of the private network won't necessarily, the real kind of technical private network won't really exist, that people will go with sliced public networks with their own security solutions on top of it, that will actually be the better model?
I think inevitably it's not a black and white answer. So both will coexist. All I'm saying is most of the actual requirements can be met by public networks. But at the same time, it's the customer that counts. If they insist on having a dedicated private network, they can also do that in partnership with operators, or in some countries they can do it themselves. It will be a mix.
How do you actually deploy it? Because we've talked about this in manufacturing. You've got your factory and you are attempting to make it smarter. You want to delete your wires, as you're saying, and you want to kind of literally delete your wires, but also kind of metaphorically delete your wires. How do you actually install it? What does it look like? What do you actually put into your factory?
Well, that's one of the deciding points, and one of the reasons why you would typically partner with one of the gentlemen here on my virtual left, because you're going to need some 5G expertise to do this. You can, in theory, just go buy what we call 5G in a box, but obviously it's all very well just deploying the equipment. You've got to know how to operate a network as well, and that's where companies like Huawei and Orange and others, they're really the world's leading experts in this sort of thing. It's not as easy as just buying a Wi-Fi access point and sticking it in your bedroom. You've got to optimize the network. We're going to talk a lot about efficiency later. Power efficiency is incredibly important. It was before the energy prices went through the roof. It's even more important now. There's a lot you can do to tune that network. If you want to get the best that 5G has to offer, then you really need to be using AI, as Philip mentioned as well, to monitor the network and to make sure it's the most efficient, not just in terms of performance, which everybody focuses on in terms of throughput and latency, but also in terms of energy efficiency as well.
I want to also, you just touched on this, from the availability of devices. As a European citizen, can I now easily get access to these devices, or are there not supply chain issues as there have been post-pandemic all across Europe, across lots of different sectors? Laurent?
I'm sorry, who was that addressed?
Yeah, sorry, Laurent. Go on, Laurent. Can we actually get access to these 5G devices now?
For the 5G devices are typical for the handsets, yes. So we have access to the devices. So it's not not really disturbed by the supply chain. So this is something that we can offer in our shops. As I said, more than 60% of the devices are 5G compatible, and it works for smartphones and also for tablets. When we are talking about other devices which are more specific, I think really here we are just at the beginning of a new ecosystem. So it's more complex, but it's not just because of supply chain. It's also because for most of the use cases that we are talking about, some devices already exist in 4G, and it takes also sometimes to make evolution and to have them also available also in 5G.
Philip, what are the arguments you can give to consumers for them to adopt 5G? Because we've talked about manufacturing, and I think the argument's probably quite clear when it comes to simplifying and gaining efficiencies. What are the arguments for consumers to give up 4G, which is already rather good? Why would they need to go to 5G?
I think it's a good question. A lot of the consumers are concerned about it. So actually, besides the MVP from last week, Huawei also held a business leader roundtables in Thailand as well. At least the event, so more than 30 senior executives from the international operators and the industry partners discuss how we can further grow the 5G market. So all of them, agree the three factors are the most critical to the 5G business deployment. More entry-level the 5G devices, the better the network experience, and the innovative the content and the applications. So when it comes to the innovative the content and the applications, it's agreed like the new videos, cloud gaming, and AR are the top three killer services. So nearly around 40% of the 5G operators around the world have already provided value-added 5G services, in addition to their original packages. So let me explain in more details about the new videos. The 5G new videos like the 4K, the multi-view, and the free view videos, and will be a new growth point for the 5G in the consumer market. So in Europe, one of the Greek operators in Greece has already launched a new basketball game, the live streaming services. It can offer the 5G free view. So it can bring the viewers up the viewing and the interactive experience. And also in the Middle East, one of the Saudi Arabian operators has launched a 5G-based cloud gaming services as well. It can allow the consumers to play the cloud games on the TV, tablet, and the mobile as well. So the need for this expensive gaming hardware and all the massive downloads.
Okay, so it's this metaverse world and the gaming world and sports as well that you're talking about. Laurent, how close are we being able to experience sports in a 5G environment here in Europe? Is that already happening, or is that something that's on the horizon?
You mean regarding sports? Sports?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good question. I think we are experimenting today. So it's not yet deployed at large scale, but we are experimenting in the stadium the capacity to provide to users, people, the possibility to zoom on a particular player, for instance, and get information on a player. So really to get an immersive feeling when you are watching a game. You want to be part of it, and you want to get all the information and really understand what happens. And so there are new usages which are extremely innovative that we can experiment, and that will come step by step.
Okay, and does that involve me buying new devices if I want to do that then?
No, it's something that you can already do if we provide the capacity in the stadium, but that you can already do with a 5G compatible device.
And that's all about providing the speed and the different points of view on a fast-moving game, then, is it? Alex,
yeah.
Alex, can I bring you in on this? Have you experienced one of these things?
I've seen demonstrations. I haven't actually experienced it. I'm not really that big a sports fan, to be honest. But if you look at some of the largest stadia in the US, for example, they've done quite a lot of this as well. There's two problems. One, the sheer amount of data that gets generated because you've got so many sports fans in one place. And then the desire, as both Philippe and Laurent mentioned, of everybody wanting to have their own personal view. They want their own basic camera angle to choose from, follow the match from a different perspective. So the US operators have been doing quite a lot on that. And in the process, I think one of them, I've forgotten which one it was, set a new world record for the amount of data transferred. I think it was the Super Bowl, ironically. This year, they set a new record for the amount of data that was shipped. But if you think about it, that's the sort of problem that you're dealing with. Yes, we're delivering it through a standard 5G device, as Laurent said, but there are literally hundreds of thousands of you standing in a very small location. So that's a pretty high capacity demand. It's the sort of thing that millimeter wave, by the way, is pretty good for as well. But yeah, most stadia around the world are looking into this. They want to be the most connected stadium. And there's been similar things done in Formula racing as well, like Formula E, Formula One, with different views of watching the game as well. But as Laurent said, it's not really scale yet. This isn't sort of mass market yet, but it works. It's the sort of thing that will be rolled out.
Talking about goals, we know the EU has a goal of getting uninterrupted 5G coverage across all urban areas and major transport routes by 2025. Are they going to make it, Laurent? And what kind of difference will that make to Europeans, in fact?
Yes, I'm very optimistic in that space. So, as you said, the EU adopted a 5G action plan for Europe. They did that already in 2016. And they wanted to ensure that there was a good deployment of 5G infrastructure across Europe. The objective was to make sure at first that 5G was deployed in all European states by 2020, at least launching 5G, and that's something which happened. By the way, maybe a few exceptions, but I think that almost everywhere now we have 5G. In addition to that, there was also the objective to make sure that urban areas were covered, definitely with a good coverage, and also that the roads also were covered, highways, and also cross-border highways in Europe. If we look at, I can take the example of France. If we look at France, I think in the urban areas today, and it was measured by our regulator recently, we already have a good broadband 4G and 5G coverage in urban areas. So which means that, to answer your questions, by 2025, I'm pretty sure that it will be covered and we will reach the goal of EU with no problem.
In fact, you mentioned something that's, I think, kind of quite a common issue for users of mobile networks. And I experienced this myself recently, taking the train from Paris to Brussels. I'm using my mobile network on my computer, but then when we go over the border, the guy on the phone next to me, his phone call cuts out. I can see that my documents are not loading as I want them to. I've obviously got this little grey zone as I go across that border. Can you fix that?
Yes, so it's a good question, and we are working on that. As you know, typically in Europe, we have many areas that we need to connect. So we are experimenting today in a project which is funded also by EU, and we are working together with other operators and experimenting at the border between Germany, France, and also Luxembourg and Belgium. And we are experimenting different use cases to make sure that, for instance, the experience that you had does not happen again. And this is something that we need to deliver for trains, but also for cars, of course.
Yeah, and I was exactly. Philip, can I bring you in on this one? I see you reacting. What's the experience been from Huawei, and how do you fix these kinds of problems?
Yes, I think in view of the technology, I think if we can deploy the more base stations, especially along with the motorway, I think basically the coverage can be guaranteed. And how can we improve the experience? So I think we need to some innovative software or features to enhance it. So it's not only depends on the product or solution itself, but also the professional service, and is required as well. So, and actually we already earned a lot of the experience globally, and also help our operator, help the carrier operators, and already solve these kind of problems. But basically, we need more base stations. It's the fundamental.
Literally, more devices on the ground in those areas is how you fix the problem. Then it's not just a kind of a software thing or a rules thing between different operators. You need more hardware too.
So I think the 5G is the best solution. I think it's the answer to your questions. So of course, the 5G can provide 10 times the capacity and also the huge connectivities to the consumers. So I think we can deploy more 5G base stations to solve this problem. The 5G definitely is more reliable and more the capacity than the 4G.
I'm going to move on now to security and privacy. And we know that when we first started reporting about 5G, certainly when I was doing this job 10 years ago, there were lots of questions about security and privacy on these networks, particularly to do with the multiplication of the number of devices, as we've just been talking. Laurent, how do we address those issues? How are they being addressed at the moment?
So I think that the first thing that we need to say is that by design, at the beginning of 5G, in the standard and in the specification, security was really at the heart of the specification. And typically, for instance, in the standard and in the current implementation, there is encryption between all the way in between the device and the network. And I think it's important to implement that. We have much stronger security by design in 5G than in previous generations. We also know, and I think it's important to understand that we have to face with new security challenges. 5G, for instance, will incorporate a new software dimension. We are moving to cloud deployments, and that means also that there are some new kinds of threats that we need to deal with. We also want to expose some APIs on the network, so we obviously need to protect those APIs. So it means also in terms of mindset for engineers, for architects, for operators. And operators, I mean, people operating and managing the network, there is a lot of work that we have to do. We also recognize that 5G, because of the bandwidth and because of the throughput that we can bring, it can also become a vector for attacks, for malicious users, and we need to protect companies and customers from this kind of attacks. And we know that, for instance, in Orange, we have Orange Cyber Defense affiliate, and we have a good set of very knowledgeable people who are working typically on those kind of use cases in order to protect our customers.
Alex, we often get the impression that 5G is kind of brand new, and it's all just a whole new setup that's going to be entirely separate from the legacy systems. But actually, you were explaining to me last week that that's not the case. In fact, that the 5G that we have now kind of rests on a lot of older equipment. How safe are those devices? And do we just need to try and get rid of them?
Well, it's not just the devices, it's the networks. If you think about it, in Europe right now, most operators are actually running 4 different generations at the same time, which of course is crazy from an operational point of view and from an energy efficiency point of view, but we'll come back to that. As Laurent said quite rightly, 5G is by far the most secure generation that's ever been produced. But of course, it sits alongside, or in some cases on top of, existing 4G, 2G, 3G networks. And some of the attackers will basically try and make advantage of that by bidding you down. They'll pretend basically they don't support 5G. So even if you've got a 5G device, they might basically try and force you back to an older technology that would have more weaknesses. That's something that we're very cognizant of. We run a fraud and security group with more than 1,000 professional security experts, including the 2 companies here with us today. We also run what's called a vulnerability disclosure scheme. So security researchers will often share vulnerabilities they've found with us in advance. That gives us time sometimes to go back to the standards bodies, etc., and fix them before they're in public. And we also run effectively a sharing service. We call it TISAC, Telecom Information Sharing and Analysis Center. That's basically where operators can share indicators of so-called compromise. That's where one operator has experienced the problem. Typically, it's not going to be just on that one network. So they share the indicators and we can do something about them. But if you think about it, when 2G was created, the security paradigm was completely different to the one we have today. It was more security by privacy. We used to have encryption algorithms locked in safes at that time. Now it's more security by opening everything up and having all of the attackers, the researchers, attack it openly, kind of crowdsourcing it, and that works. But at the same time, 2G networks have been around for 30 years, so they need to be retired. 2G, 3G, by retiring those older networks, it's not just saving money in terms of operational expense, it's also saving energy, and it's also increasing the security of the networks.
Philip, can I come to you? Do you think we're ever going to manage to fix these problems, or are they just going to be there? We're always going to be having questions about security and privacy, and that we just have to live with it?
Yeah, it's true. So the digital technology has greatly improved people's lives and fueled economic growth. But the challenges in the cybersecurity and the privacy protection are also on the rise. So addressing these challenges is our top priority. So we are working tirelessly to develop the secure and trustworthy and quality products and solutions. So to help our customers to build the more resilience the networks.
Laurent, can I bring the same question over to you? Do you think it's just going to sit around there, or are technologies like quantum computing technologies going to allow us to eradicate those sorts of problems?
Definitely, I think you will always have a kind of race between attackers and between technology. And I think we had to implement a new, more secure technology with 5G, and this is the case. That doesn't mean that it is perfect. We will need to face new kinds of threats, and we will need to adapt. And I think this is the reason why we are putting a lot of effort in, for instance, within Orange, security and knowledge about security and skills, upskilling people is so important.
I want to move on also to the other big question in everybody's mind these days, which is energy and the environment. We know that we have the COP climate conference going on at the moment. A lot of people are concerned about their energy bills as well. I often hear that 5G is going to help us to reduce our energy costs. How does that work, Alex? Can you explain how 5G helps us to become more efficient?
I suspect that both of the gentlemen with us today could do a better job, but I'll start if you like. It's interesting when you think about the data explosion we've been living through for the past 10 years or so. If you look at the volumes of data we're processing now compared to, say, 10 or 15 years ago, it's orders of magnitude different. But I saw an excellent presentation from one of Laurent's colleagues at Orange last week in Thailand, which shows that basically the amount of energy used by the operators is largely flat. So we've had this absolute tsunami of data explosion, but we haven't seen the same sort of increase in usage by operators on their own networks. And that's largely because each successive generation of technology has been much more energy efficient. And Philip, for example, can talk about his PowerStar and PowerStar Plus type products and stuff like that. The other aspect that people often forget is by using our networks, particularly sensors on a massive scale, you can actually reduce energy consumption in virtually every other sector. And actually, we've got some good studies and some good case studies on that as well. By using smart sensors on virtually any type of network, you can actually make it far more energy efficient. So operators do that on their own networks, but they're doing it increasingly in other sectors as well.
Philip, can I bring you in on this? How are we gaining efficiencies?
So I think so. This question is asking us how we can balance between the environmental production and the business development. So as a ICT infrastructure provider, so Huawei has been focusing on the environmental protections for quite a while. So through our product solutions innovations, so we make the biggest impact by improving the energy efficiency of our customers' network and reducing their carbon emissions. So I think 5G is a good example of the how technology helps balance the development and the environmental protection. So the 5G networks are about 10 times more energy efficiency than the 4G network. So, and also providing the better user experience and supporting their higher density of the connections. So it means, so while meeting the same data services requirement, the 5G networks actually consume less energy than the 4G networks. So the 5G networks also can support the larger bandwidth and the more data applications. So, and with the 5G, the more activities can be carried out online, and we also can reduce the carbon emission. So all of this means the industry digitalizations can actually help the development the more sustainable. So Huawei also follow a strategy. We call it more with less was. I think it's quite similar to the GSMA, doing more with less. So it can help us to develop a set of the green indicators and 3 layers of the green solutions. So these indicators and solutions can help the carriers to improve the energy efficiency of their the networks.
Can I bring in Laurent on this one? Is that part of the value proposition that you bring to companies as well? Is in fact that you're going to be able to reduce their electricity bill literally by installing 5G networks?
Yes, definitely, and I think you're right to say that it's not just about reducing the energy consumption or controlling the energy consumptions of network and also reducing the CO2 impact of networks. It's also, and even more important, to use and leverage 5G to help other companies to manage in a better way scarce resources, but also to manage and consume less energy because we will leverage more data, we will be smarter, and there are many different kinds of use cases where because of the digital infrastructure that we can provide, we can help other industries to reduce their own impact.
We're going to wrap things up now because we're running out of time. I often hear buzzwords as well about the future, about what the future looks like. I hear about 5.5G, I hear about 5G advanced. Philip, can you just talk us through the vision, I suppose, for how this is going to develop? We know 5G is arriving. It's here in lots of places. What's the development of it look like?
Okay, I think we already mentioned the 2025. So in our understanding, the year of the 2025 also is a key milestone for the ICT industry. So we believe the 5G will naturally evolve to the 5.5G in 2025. So 5.5G and will enable even the much better experience for the customers and the more the business opportunities for the operators. So all the industry players, including the world-leading operators, are already moving faster and faster towards to the 5.5G. So we can see this to in the improvement to the standards, spectrum, and the industry, the value chain, and also the ecosystem as well. The 5.5G and will be the 10 times better than the 5G in multiple ways. So we summarize it in the three words, in the three ways. The first of all, it can deliver a tenfold increase in the user experience. And the second, the 5.5G will deliver a tenfold increase in the connectivities. And the last one is the 5.5G will enable a tenfold increase in the energy efficiency.
Laurent, can I ask you a little bit to tell me a bit more about this evolution that Philip just painted a picture of?
Yes, thank you. So I think Philippe already said a lot of important evolutions that will come. Perhaps in the very short term, I would stress the fact that we will deploy in all our markets, European markets, 5G standalone. So we will have the capacity also to have a full 5G standalone network. And also the capacity to slice the network. So that means that it will allow us also to provide to our customers more specific logical networks to address some key requirements such as security, but also local data processing, but also latency. I think that latency will become something much more important in the future. When we think about immersive applications, it's really about understanding from an end-to-end standpoint the latency requirements of the network. And we can expect some very interesting use cases with new immersive applications, not just about the metaverse, but maybe different kinds of metaverse experiences. If we look more forward in the future, I think there will be also some very interesting use cases that will come, for instance, to extend the coverage through direct satellite access that will complement terrestrial 5G, but we will be able to extend the 5G coverage also with satellites. And also beyond that, I think we expect to have many interesting features. Maybe sensing at some point will become a reality also, but it's more in the future.
Final word from Alex. What's your vision? What are you most excited about 5G over the next couple of years here in Europe?
Well, I think, to be honest, my colleagues have said nearly everything. 5G Advanced is coming soon. That's the official name for 5.5G. Laurent mentioned a lot of the different use cases, non-terrestrial networks, XR improvements and things like that as well. So I think for Europe, the most important thing is that we meet the goal as stated, that we have 5G deployed at reasonable levels everywhere. I think that in itself will make such a big difference to European citizens. It's not always about the sexiest, the highest throughput and the lowest latency, making sure that everybody has a reasonable level. And that includes, by the way, the use of 5G for fixed wireless as well, replacement, because in some areas that's actually another massive use case and driver for that. But I think it's making sure that it's rolled out consequently everywhere and that all citizens have access to a very good level of broadband.
Well, my thanks to Alex Sinclair from GSMA, Laurent Leboucher from Orange, and Philippe Song from Huawei for joining us for this Euronews debate. Send Euronews your feedback using social media, and I'll see you soon.